There's a story about a family, not the kind of family you think of when you hear words like love and support. My family taught me early that as a boy, my worth was measured by how much I could prove myself to my parents. But no matter how hard I tried, that unconditional love I craved never came my way. I started working when I was just 13 years old, grinding to earn every penny, only to be told later that all my hard-earned savings had to go to pay for my older sister's cosmetic surgeries. Grace, my sister, had a life I could never have. Spoiled, pampered, and rarely asked to try. Meanwhile, I was left to bear the weight alone, invisible and unheard. Have you ever felt like you're living in someone else's shadow? Like no matter what you do, the expectations and unfairness follow you like a curse? My story is about that fight, the rage, the heartbreak, and the unexpected ally who changed everything, my grandfather. Before we begin, drop a comment below and let us know which city you're watching from. Now, sit back and enjoy the video. Growing up in my family felt like walking a tightrope stretched over an abyss. Every step weighted down with expectations I could never quite meet. My parents were steeped in a kind of old-fashioned patriarchy, but not the kind that honors or uplifts.
No.
It was a twisted version, one where being a boy meant shouldering endless burdens, while my sister Grace, the eldest, reigned like a princess untouched by consequence. From the earliest memories I have, it was clear I was the man of the house. Dad's voice would echo in my head, telling me I had to be serious, responsible, and above all, prove my worth. No handouts, he said. You earn everything you get. But Grace? Everything was handed to her wrapped in ribbons and praise. She never had to struggle. She never had to prove anything except to stay beautiful and get married well. That was her destiny, and my infernal job was to be her shadow. Work harder, earn more, sacrifice myself for a family that barely saw me. I remember nights staring at the ceiling, wondering what had I done wrong. Why was love so measured in this house? Why was my worth never enough? I could hear their voices, not even raising their tone, just subtle little jabs, reminders that I was less favored. Mom, usually my refuge, often looked the other way, caught in the web of favoritism spun around Grace. Sometimes, when Mom thought I wasn't listening, she whispered things like, "Grace is our pride," to Dad, who only nodded without remorse. My brother-in-law, Luke, once pulled me aside after one such night. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. "You're working your ass off while all she does is play dress up. It's not fair." But those words, though comforting, felt like a fragile lifeline in quicksand. Because as much as Luke sympathized, he was part of the world that let it happen. Then there was Kelsey, my younger sister. She was the wild card, the one spark of light I clung to. Different from Grace in every way, strong-willed, unpretentious, and most importantly, not another pawn to be groomed into a princess. I loved her fiercely, but even she wasn't immune to the slow poison of our family's ideals. My fiercest fight would be to keep her from falling into the same trap, to carve a different path for her than the one Grace was doomed to walk. This household was like a battlefield where I was expected to be both soldier and martyr. Grace was the heir to a throne built on indulgence and denial. No one coached me on how to navigate this minefield of emotions, of feeling unseen and yet burdened beyond measure. I felt abandoned, not just by love, but by fairness, by hope itself. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was protecting Kelsey from becoming another casualty of this toxic legacy. Holding back tears, swallowing down every ounce of anger and betrayal, I learned early that strength meant silence. But that silence was breaking me. And yet, somewhere amidst this chaos, a small, rebellious flame ignited inside me, whispering that maybe, just maybe, I deserved better. Maybe my worth wasn't defined by the narrow lens my parents held up. Maybe there was a way out. But before I could find that way, I had to survive the present, where favoritism didn't just shape lives, it shattered them. From the moment I was told I had to prove my worth, my world changed. I was only 13, an age where most kids are discovering who they want to be. not shouldering the weight of survival. But for me, proving my worth wasn't about dreaming. It was about working harder and longer than anyone else expected. My first job was walking dogs in our quiet neighborhood. A simple task, but it quickly became my lifeline. Early mornings, braving the cold or the rain, I'd leash up stray dogs with patience I didn't know I had. That tiny income was mine, earned with sweat and unwavering focus. I saved every penny, dreaming that one day, this money would be my ticket to college, my escape route from the suffocating cage my family had created. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. My parents never asked how much I made or how I spent it. They didn't want to understand. They just wanted proof that I was responsible. It wasn't love they were after, it was obedience. I remember a conversation with my mom that still haunts me. I told her, I want to save for college, for a future that's mine. Her eyes didn't soften, they hardened. She told me, you're not a child anymore. You have responsibilities. It was a crushing blow because I wasn't just a boy anymore. I was their worker, their shield, their unspoken sacrifice. Grace, meanwhile, had no such talk. Her days were filled with shopping trips, makeup tutorials, and endless compliments about her looks. No mention of responsibilities. No demand to prove anything but her beauty. It wasn't just unfair. It was a division of love itself. My Uncle Tom, my father's brother, was one of the few people who saw through the facade. One evening, he pulled me aside after a family dinner. You're doing all the heavy lifting, he said softly, but you've got to know, you're not alone. We see you. Those words pierced through the numbness, offering a rare flicker of hope. Then there was Kelsey, my little sister who, unlike Grace, never wanted the spotlight but was slowly being dragged into the family's expectations. I would spend nights coaching her to shield herself from the same disappointments, telling her, don't let them define your worth. You're more than their expectations. But as much as I tried to hold it together, the weight was unbearable. There were nights when I curled up in the dark, feeling invisible and unwanted. The silence of my parents was the loudest noise, telling me I was never enough, that my sacrifices were invisible because I was never the favored child. Despite all this, I refused to break. Each day was a battle to prove that my dreams mattered, that my worth was real, even if no one else saw it. I worked multiple jobs, balanced school, and carried the burden of a family torn by favoritism and neglect. Yet, the defining moment came when my father, the man who demanded I prove myself, asked something I never expected. He wanted my entire savings to pay for Grace's cosmetic surgery. It felt like a final betrayal, a devastating punch from the man I'd worked so hard to please. But I knew then that I was done being invisible. I was no longer his pawn. That's when I dared to reach out for help beyond the walls of our broken home. And that's where my grandfather entered the story, a man whose name alone could shake the very foundation of my family's world. As this chapter closes, I teeter on the edge of breaking free, or being swallowed whole. The struggles of survival at such a young age were only the beginning. Ahead lies an even fiercer battle, not just for money or approval, but for justice and self-respect. The storm finally hit one ordinary evening when everything I had been holding back broke loose. I sat across from my father in the dim light of our cramped kitchen, the air heavy with all the unspoken words that had been simmering for years. He looked tired but resolute, as if preparing to deliver a verdict that would change everything, because it did. I need you to give me your savings. All of it, he said quietly, eyes locked on mine. It's for Grace. She needs the surgery. Those words didn't just echo in the room, they shattered my world. I had spent years saving every dollar, sacrificing my childhood, working jobs no one else wanted, all with the dream of going to college and finding my own way out. And now, my father wanted to take it all away, to fund the endless indulgences of my sister, the same sister who had never once been asked to prove she was worth anything. I can still feel the fire rising inside me, the rage blending with disbelief. You want me to pay for that? After everything? You've made it clear I'm only good for working, not for having dreams, I shouted. my voice cracking with years of frustration. My mother, who had been silent in the background, suddenly stepped in, her words a venomous mixture of guilt and manipulation. You have to think about family. Sacrifice is what holds us together. Grace is struggling. You're supposed to help. But I knew better. This wasn't about family. It was about favoritism disguised as duty. It was about me being the family's ATM, expected to give without question while Grace was given everything. Tensions exploded. In that moment, years of silent suffering spilled out. I told them how I'd worked since I was 13, how I'd given everything to prove myself, only to be told now that none of it was mine to keep. I called out the hypocrisy, the lavish clothes, the parties, the easy life of my sister, and the emotional neglect that left me feeling abandoned in my own home. Grace, sitting at the table, rolled her eyes and kicked my leg under it. But I was past caring. The divide in our family was as wide as ever, and the war was no longer quiet. My Uncle Mark, who had always tried to stay neutral, walked in just as the shouting reached its peak. He looked between us, shaking his head. "This isn't how a family should treat each other," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time we all face the truth." That truth was as uncomfortable as it was undeniable. The family I once thought was a refuge was unraveling before my eyes. What was supposed to be love had turned into control, manipulation, and bitter resentment. After that night, the house was divided. Silence filled the rooms where laughter used to live, and the weight of betrayal hung heavily over every meal, every conversation. But within that storm of conflict, I found something unexpected, a spark of clarity. I realized I didn't have to carry the family's burdens alone. I realized that fairness wasn't just a hope, it was a fight I was ready to lead. Just when I thought my family's story had reached its darkest chapter, a light appeared from an unexpected place. My grandfather, the man I had always heard about but rarely saw, stepped into the chaos with a presence that demanded attention. When I reached out to him, desperate for someone who could understand, I didn't fully grasp the power his name held or the ripple effect his involvement would cause. Our first meeting was tense, yet strangely comforting. In his modest living room, surrounded by old photographs and memories I barely knew, I poured my heart out. I told him everything: the unfairness, the endless pressure, the feeling of being invisible despite my sacrifices. I told him about Grace's endless demands and my savings being dragged away. I even confessed the exhaustion of feeling trapped between love and resentment. Grandpa listened without interrupting, his eyes soft but unwavering. When I finished, he simply said, "You deserve justice. We're going to fix this." Those words were not just an offer of help. They were a promise that someone finally believed in me when my own parents never had. Back at home, the atmosphere shifted the moment Grandpa decided to step in. His authority was undeniable. My father, usually so rigid and unyielding, suddenly seemed cautious, even afraid. It was as though the very foundation of our family was trembling beneath the weight of Grandpa's presence. One evening, Grandpa called the entire family together for what was supposed to be a simple gathering. Instead, it turned into a reckoning. He looked each of us in the eye, especially Dad, and demanded answers about the choices being made, the money spent, the favoritism shown. Grace sat there, stunned and unable to meet anyone's gaze, the weight of truth cracking her carefully constructed armor. My parents fumbled for excuses, but Grandpa's voice cut through every lie. "This family isn't just about one child. It's about all of you, and you haven't been fair." Then came the decision that shattered every expectation. Grandpa announced that his inheritance, a sum of $300,000 meant for all 3 grandchildren, would no longer be divided equally. Instead, most of it would go to me and Kelsey, those who had been left behind and neglected, while Grace would receive only a small portion. The room erupted. Grace screamed that it was unfair. Dad's face turned red with anger and disbelief. Mom's silence spoke volumes. But Grandpa stood firm, his voice steady and resolute. "You created this divide. This is your reckoning." In that moment, something shifted inside me. For the first time, I felt seen, not just as a son or a worker, but as a person worthy of respect, love, and justice. Grandpa's decision wasn't just about money. It was about setting things right, about breaking the cycle of favoritism that had poisoned our family. Even as the dust settled and the family fractured further, I knew this was the start of a new chapter. A chapter where fairness had a chance to thrive, where Kelsey could grow without the shadow of favoritism looming over her, and where I could begin to rebuild myself, not just as a son, but as a man who had finally found his voice. But this victory came with a price. My parents' resentment grew, and the battles were far from over. Yet, with Grandpa by my side, I felt stronger than I ever had. The confrontation with my grandfather was like a thunderclap that echoed through the hollow halls of our family home. The air, once thick with unspoken grievances, now crackled with tension and disbelief. My parents, caught between anger and shame, retreated into silence, while Grace's eyes burned with a mixture of envy and despair. She had lost the crown she always assumed was hers by right. For days afterward, the house felt like a battlefield strewn with invisible landmines. Every glance, every word was heavy with suspicion and resentment. My father, who had always been the unyielding patriarch, seemed smaller somehow, his authority chipped away not by force, but by truth and consequence. His silence was a loud admission. Mom tried to bridge the widening gap, but her attempts often felt like thin threads stretched too far. She pleaded, manipulated, and sometimes lashed out in ways that only deepened the scars between us. I learned to shield myself emotionally, knowing that vulnerability could be weaponized in this fractured environment. Kelsey, my little sister, was caught in the crossfire more than anyone else. Her youthful innocence clashed painfully with the bitterness around her. I remember nights when she would call me, voice trembling, sharing how Mom and Dad tried to sway her, to mold her into the next Grace. I told her to hold on, to be strong, to hold on to who she truly was. Despite everything, this upheaval gave me something I hadn't felt in years, a glimpse of freedom. When the time came for me to leave for college, it was bittersweet. Packing my bags felt like shedding a heavy skin I had worn for too long. Saying goodbye to Kelsey brought tears neither of us could hold back. She was my anchor, my reason to fight. College was a new world, a chance to build myself without the shadow of favoritism and expectation looming. I balanced work and study, but now it was for me, not to prove anything to anyone else. The inheritance my grandfather secured gave me breathing room, but more than that, it gave me hope. Back home, the family dynamic shifted again. My parents, wary of further loss, kept their distance. Grace oscillated between attempts to mend fences and bitter outbursts, her insecurities now laid bare. Meanwhile, I found unexpected allies, friends, mentors, even distant relatives who quietly expressed their support, reminding me that I was not alone. Looking back, I realized the confrontation was less an ending than a crucible, an intense, painful trial that forged new strength and clarity. It was the moment I stopped being a shadow in my own family story and started writing my own. In the quiet moments, far from the fights and the harsh words, I began to confront what the family never dared talk about: my worth. For years, I had measured myself against the impossible standards set by parents who showed love through favoritism and neglect. But the truth I found was raw and liberating. My value wasn't tied to their approval or Grace's shadow. The wounds ran deep, betrayals that cut into my soul when the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally demanded proof of my worth through endless sacrifice. But slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt myself from those broken parts. Therapy sessions, late-night talks with friends who became chosen family, moments of silence where I finally heard my own voice speaking back to me. Kelsey became both my motivation and my mirror. Protecting her from the toxic patterns was no longer just a fight against our parents. It became a promise to nurture love and fairness where there had been none. She taught me that even in the darkest places, kindness and resilience can bloom. The journey was far from smooth. I grappled with anger, sometimes a scorching fire that threatened to consume me, and with forgiveness, a fragile bridge I struggled to cross. I realized that justice wasn't about punishment but balance, about reclaiming my dignity while letting go of the weight that held me hostage. I found strength in unexpected allies, mentors who saw past my family's scars, friends who respected my journey, and even moments of connection with grace, complicated and painful as they were. These encounters taught me about empathy, boundaries, and the messy beauty of imperfect relationships. At college, I began exploring who I was beyond the roles imposed on me. I discovered passions, built friendships, and embraced the freedom to fail and grow. The inheritance wasn't just money. It became a symbol of new beginnings, of choices made on my own terms. Looking back, the boy who once hid behind silence now stands taller, not because the family changed overnight, but because I changed within. My story isn't just about surviving favoritism or family cruelty. It's about learning to love myself fiercely, to demand fairness, and to build a legacy of compassion for those who come after me. This is not the end, but a turning point, the start of a life where my worth is mine alone to define. And as I move forward, I carry with me the lessons of pain, the fire of resilience, and the hope that one day, love will be without conditions. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated, please share where you're watching from in the comments below. Let's connect through these stories of struggle and strength. Stay tuned as I continue to share pieces of this journey, because every step forward deserves to be heard.